So, if you are listening to this right now, I want you to imagine something for a second.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Imagine you've spent, like, your entire life using this highly detailed, beautifully illustrated map to navigate a really old city.
Right. You know all the streets.
Exactly. You know exactly where the parks are. You know the boundaries. But then, one day, you sit down with an architect.
And they just kind of ruin it for you.
Yeah. They look at your map, they shake their head, and they say, you're reading this entirely wrong. This isn't a map of a city. It's a blueprint of the human mind.
Oh, wow. I mean, that would completely shatter your sense of reality.
It totally would. Every landmark you thought you understood it would instantly take on a completely different psychological dimension.
Which is exactly what we are doing today.
Yes, it is. Because if you're joining us for this deep dive, you are probably familiar with, the most famous garden story in human history.
Garden of Eden.
Right. A guy, a woman, a talking snake, and a piece of forbidden fruit.
The classic setup.
Right. And for thousands of years, the vast majority of people have been reading this narrative as literal botany, literal geography.
But our source material today asks a massive question. What if there never was an apple?
Yeah. What if the trees in these ancient texts aren't, made of wood at all?
It's a massive paradigm shift. The analytical framework we're looking at completely deconstructs that conventional literalism.
It really does. It takes these ancient, globally influential scriptures and treats them not as a history book, but as a highly sophisticated cipher.
Like a linguistic puzzle.
Exactly. And our mission in this deep dive is to decode two of the most common metaphors in that puzzle, the seed and the tree.
Because the source argues these botanical terms are actually a hidden language, right?
Yeah, specifically for human beings, divine truth, and spiritual ecosystems. We are going to analyze exactly why these specific images were chosen to represent the human condition.
And I think we should clarify something up front for the listener.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
We aren't doing this to debate theology or push any specific religious doctrine. Whether you're coming from a left-wing perspective, a right-wing perspective, or no religious background at all. We are just impartially reporting on the framework presented in the text.
Right. We are not endorsing the viewpoints. We're just unpacking the ideas. Treating the text like a cryptographer treats a coded transmission.
Exactly. We're looking at the internal logic of the metaphors to see what the ancient authors were trying to communicate about how humans process truth.
So to crack a cipher, you have to find the anomaly. Right.
You have to find where the literal interpretation completely breaks down.
Yeah, the glitch in the matrix. And to do that, we have to start small, literally, with a seed.
Right. So if you look closely at the parables in the book of Matthew, specifically chapter 13, you run into this glaring biological impossibility.
The mustard seed parable.
Yes. The text says that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. A man plants it in his field. It's the smallest of seeds, but when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Because if you've ever planted mustard, you know it's a bush.
Right. It's an herbaceous plant.
Yeah, it does not develop a massive woody trunk. You can't, chop it down and build a cabin out of it.
Scientifically, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And we really have to remember, the ancient writers were not ignorant of basic agriculture.
No, they lived in an agrarian society. Their survival depended on knowing how plants worked.
Exactly. So for a writer in that era to explicitly state that a vegetable seed grows into a giant timber tree?
That's a deliberate signal.
It's a flashing neon sign telling the reader, do not read this literally. This is a metaphor.
It's like someone today writing, he downloaded the software and it grew into a physical skyscraper.
That's a great comparison.
You instantly know they're speaking metaphorically about the impact of the technology, not its actual physical properties.
Right. So if we accept that the literal interpretation is intentionally flawed to point us toward a symbol, we have to ask, what is the seed?
What are we actually planting?
Well, in the framework of this cipher from our source, the seed is explicitly defined as the word.
The word with a capital W, right?
Yes. Specifically, it represents truth, a divine message, or an organizing philosophy.
Okay, I follow that.
And the framework points us to Isaiah 46.9, which talks about declaring the end from the beginning.
Oh, right.
So a word or a message that contains the blueprint of the end right at the very beginning is, by definition, a prophecy.
Think about that for a second. If you're listening, picture a physical seed. It's essentially biological code.
It's a tiny, highly compressed hard drive.
Exactly. packed with instructions. An acorn already contains the exact architectural blueprint of a sprawling oak tree.
It dictates the end from the beginning.
That makes perfect sense. So if the seed equals the word, this concentrated capsule of truth, then what is a tree?
In this cipher, a tree is a being that contains and grows from that word.
Which brings us to the fruit. I want to pull in Proverbs here, because this is where the cipher starts to feel like eerily modern in its psychology.
Oh, definitely. The Proverbs connection is huge.
Yeah, so Proverbs 13.2 talks about a person enjoying good things from the fruit of their mouth.
And Proverbs 18.20 says, from the fruit of their mouth, a person's stomach is filled.
Right. With the harvest of their lips, they are satisfied. Unless you are physically coughing up pomegranates, this has to be symbolic.
It undeniably is. In this ancient textual code, fruit is the result of spoken words, behaviors, and actions.
It is the output.
Exactly. Your words, the ideas you spread, the way you treat people, that is your fruit.
I was thinking about this in terms of my computer programming analogy earlier.
Let's hear it.
So the seed is the raw data or the base code, right? You plant that code, a specific philosophy, into a person.
Okay, so the person is the hardware.
Yeah. The code germinates and they grow into this incredibly complex tree of belief systems. And the fruit is the final compiled program running in the real world.
The actions that person takes based on the code.
Exactly. Does that analogy hold up to the source?
It's highly effective for understanding the input and output. But let's refine it slightly.
Okay, how so?
Because a computer program is ultimately static, whereas a tree is intensely organic and self-replicating.
Oh, true. Software doesn't bleed.
Exactly. A tree, in this ancient framework, represents a living, breathing, cognitive architecture. A seed isn't just data. It's a living truth that fundamentally alters the organism that absorbs it.
That makes a lot of sense. And that actually raises a huge question for me.
What's that?
If the seed is an idea, the tree is the person, and the fruit is their actions, what is the soil?
The soil is the human heart, or the human mind.
A psychological environment.
Right. It's where the idea is introduced. If the soil is hard, meaning the person is cynical, closed-minded, or resistant, the seed of the word cannot penetrate.
It just sits on the surface.
But if the soil is fertile and receptive, the idea takes root and begins to alter the person's entire structure.
Okay, if you're listening to this, hold that formula in your mind. Seed equals idea. Soil equals the mind. Tree equals the person. Fruit equals their actions.
Because we are about to apply this exact lens to the Garden of Eden.
And I have to tell you, when you overlay this cipher onto Genesis chapters 2 and 3, it completely rewrites human history.
It forces a total reevaluation.
Let's get into it. Genesis 2 introduces us to the garden.
And it highlights two massive focal points: the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
But the source notes a very specific, easily overlooked detail. The text says, out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree.
Made to grow, implying a process, a passage of time.
A cultivation. It didn't just pop into existence like a magic trick.
But historically, humanity has been absolutely obsessed with identifying the literal botany of this story, haven't they?
Oh, completely. Was the forbidden fruit an apple, a fig, a pomegranate?
Our framework points out the sheer absurdity of this debate. Think about human biology.
Right. If you are incredibly naive and you eat a literal piece of fruit on an empty stomach,
is it going to download divine knowledge into your brain and curse your entire bloodline?
No, you're just going to get severe indigestion.
Exactly. I mean, the source even mocks the linguistic origin of the Adam's apple.
Oh, yeah. The literal lump of cartilage in the human throat.
The idea that a piece of physical fruit got lodged in the first man's throat and structurally altered male human anatomy forever.
When you say it out loud, it sounds like a fairy tale designed for toddlers.
It really does. And the absurdity extends beyond the botany, doesn't it?
It does. Are we really supposed to believe in a literal biological snake possessing the vocal cords and intellectual capacity to debate complex theology with a woman?
I hear that, and I agree the literal reading is fraught with issues. But let me push back for a second on behalf of the listener.
Go for it.
We humans are incredibly drawn to physical, magical solutions. We love the idea of a fountain of youth, right?
Sure. Or a philosopher's stone. We want a tangible, quick fix.
Couldn't these physical timeline anomalies just be translation errors? Or the result of oral traditions mutating over time? Why assume it's a highly coordinated cipher?
That is a very fair skepticism. It is entirely possible that oral traditions mutate.
Right.
But what makes this a cipher rather than just a messy translation, is its immense internal consistency across dozens of different books written centuries apart.
The code doesn't break.
Exactly. And to your point about humans wanting physical quick fixes, that is exactly what the authors were critiquing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They used the intensely physical metaphor of eating because they understood the visceral biology of belief.
Unpack that for me. Why use eating if they mean listening to an idea? Why not just say, Eve listened to a really bad philosophy?
Because listening implies distance. You can listen to an idea and reject it.
Like letting it go in one ear and out the other.
Exactly. But when you eat something, it physically becomes part of you. It enters your digestive tract, it's absorbed into your bloodstream, it builds your cellular walls.
What?
In this framework, when you hear a lie represented by the serpent's deception and you choose to believe it, you're eating it.
You internalize it so deeply that it enters your psychological bloodstream.
Yes. It poisons your operating system. Eating is the ancient world's ultimate metaphor for the total integration of an idea into one's identity.
Okay, that entirely shifts the weight of the story. If you internalize a toxic idea, you are literally eating poisonous fruit.
Precisely.
But wait, this brings up a massive plot hole in the literal interpretation of Eden that I want to dig into. The timeline of death.
Yes, the mortality paradox. This is where the literal reading utterly collapses under its own weight.
Because in Genesis 2.1 scene, God explicitly says regarding the tree of knowledge, "For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die."
In the day, a 24-hour window.
Right. Yet if we look down the timeline to Genesis 5.3, Adam lived to be 930 years old.
He demonstrably did not drop dead physically the day he ate the fruit.
Not even close. Furthermore, in Genesis 3.22, God expresses concern that humanity might now reach out and eat from the tree of life and live forever.
So the logic here is that if a literal biological tree of life existed that could grant physical cellular immortality.
Human history would look completely different.
Completely. We wouldn't be building MRI machines or researching stem cells or seeking spiritual salvation.
We would have spent the last 10,000 years sending heavily armed expeditions into the Middle East with machetes trying to find the magic immortality tree.
Exactly. The search for physical immortality via a literal plant completely misses the profound epistemological point of the text.
Right.
If the tree wasn't a physical plant, then the death it caused wasn't physical biological death.
It was a spiritual death, a cognitive death.
Yes. It was an alienation from the source of truth. The framework argues that the death was instantaneous on a spiritual level, even though the biological body kept walking around for another 9 centuries.
Okay, so if the trees in Eden aren't literal flora, what exactly are they? Because if we are replacing literal trees with a metaphor, that metaphor needs to be rock solid.
And this is where the framework takes us on a tour of other prophetic books to prove its central, mind-bending thesis.
Which is?
Trees are people. And specifically, highly influential people, leaders, or distinct communities.
Our sources pull from Isaiah 44.23 and 55.12, right? Verses that vividly describe mountains singing and trees clapping their hands.
Yes. And again, the text asks us to use our common sense. Can a mountain range have vocal cords?
Can a pine tree clap?
Reading this as literal topography is nonsense.
It's clear personification.
But it goes deeper than just a poetic flourish. It's a specific identity code used in ancient geopolitics. Take Judges 9, verses 8 through 15.
Oh, I love this part. This is one of the most revealing passages in the entire text.
It really is. In this story, the trees literally hold a political election to choose a king.
Let me set the scene for you, the listener, because it's wild. The trees go to the olive tree and say, "Be our king."
And the olive tree basically replies, "I'm too busy producing precious oil to go wave my branches over you."
Right. So then they go to the fig tree. And the fig tree says, "I'm not leaving my sweet fruit to be a politician."
So they go to the grapevine, who says, "My wine cheers both gods and mortals, leave me alone."
And finally, they go to the bramble bush, a thorny, useless weed. And the bramble says, "Sure, I'll be your king, but if you cross me, fire will come out of me and burn you all down."
It is a devastatingly sharp political allegory.
It really is.
The trees producing valuable things. The oil, the fruit, the wine, they represent productive, wise citizens. They have no desire for the corrupting power of politics.
So the power falls to the bramble.
Right. The violent, unproductive, prickly individual who rules through threats. You cannot read that and still think trees just means wood.
It's an allegory about different types of people in a society. But the clincher, the passage that truly anchors this interpretation back to the Garden of Eden, is Ezekiel 31.
Ezekiel 31 is the decoder ring.
It describes a magnificent cedar tree in Lebanon, towering above all others.
And it explicitly says that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of God envied it.
Let's just sit with that image. Jealous trees.
Literal oak trees and apple trees feeling complex human emotions like envy and engaging in geopolitical rivalries.
And then the text says this cedar is cut down and cast into hell, the underworld, and the other dead trees are comforted by its fall.
Immortal souls of trees go into the underworld. It is absurd if read literally.
Completely.
But the text doesn't leave us hanging. It explicitly links these metaphors to humanity. Isaiah 5.7 states outright, "The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are the garden of his delight."
Or in some translations, the trees he delighted in.
Exactly. The men are the trees. The house or the nation is the vineyard.
So if we follow this logic to its inevitable conclusion, the Garden of Eden wasn't a biological park.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't a localized terrarium fenced off somewhere near the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
It was a community. It was a specific organization of people, an ancient society where specific words or teachings were planted into specific people, the trees, to cultivate a culture of wisdom.
You know, what strikes me is that this actually makes total sense when you think about how we still use language today.
How do you mean?
We do this intuitively. If you're researching your ancestry, you build a family tree.
Right.
If a massive corporation fires a bunch of underperforming executives, they announce they are trimming the deadwood.
That's very true.
We talk about someone having deep roots in their hometown or a young artist blossoming. We already know that trees equal people.
This ancient text is just formalizing our intuitive psychology into a theological cipher.
That's exactly right. We still speak this ancient symbolic language in our everyday lives. We've just forgotten that we're supposed to apply it to these foundational texts.
We completely compartmentalized our logic.
Okay, if Eden was a community and trees are people, what does this mean for the story of human origins? Because this brings us to what I think is the most controversial, paradigm-shifting claim in this entire deep dive.
It's a total reinterpretation of the timeline of humanity.
And it hinges on a very strange, often overlooked healing miracle in the book of Mark, chapter 8.
Yes, Jesus has brought a blind man. But unlike other miracles where someone is touched and instantly has 20/20 vision, this healing happens in distinct stages.
It's a process. Jesus spits on the man's eyes, touches him, and asks, "Do you see anything?"
And the man's response, his half-healed vision, is so incredibly specific.
He says, "I see men as trees walking."
I see men as trees walking. Why would an ancient writer include that bizarre intermediate detail unless it was communicating a profound structural truth about reality?
I used to think the guy was just disoriented, like his brain couldn't process shapes yet, so tall, vertical, blurry things looked like trunks.
That's the modern clinical interpretation.
Yeah.
But within this cipher, it's the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yes. Before the man's physical vision is completely clear, his spiritual vision is activated. He sees the deep underlying symbolic reality of the world, men are trees.
The text is using the blind man's awakening to awaken the reader.
Exactly. And to bolster this, the framework loops us back to the Old Testament. Deuteronomy 32.2 says, "Let my teaching fall like rain, and my words descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants."
Well, teachings don't fall on literal grass. They fall on people.
Which brings us all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, the very first page of the book, verses 11 and 12.
This is the third day of creation. God commands the earth to bring forth grass, herbs, and fruit-bearing trees.
And here is the absolute kicker. This happens before Adam is even introduced into the narrative.
Adam doesn't show up until later.
Right. So if we connect the dots, if grass, herbs, and trees represent different types or classes of people from the common masses to the influential leaders, then Genesis 1 is not describing the creation of literal botany.
Wait, you're telling me Genesis 1 is just a roster of existing human populations?
According to this framework, yes.
Isn't that a massive stretch? I mean, how do we know they weren't just writing a poetic but literal creation myth about how the dirt and the plants got here?
Because of the internal consistency we just traced. From the mustard seed, to the singing mountains, to the political bramble, to the blind man.
The cipher holds.
It holds. If trees are people throughout the entire rest of the text, they are people in Genesis 1. The framework's radical conclusion is this. Before Adam appeared in the narrative, the earth was already heavily populated.
Let that sink in if you're listening.
The framework argues that reading Genesis 1 literally means we are blind to the true meaning, exactly like the blind man before he was fully healed.
When we look at Genesis 1 with blind eyes, we just see literal pine trees and literal bluegrass.
But when our vision is cleared by the cipher, we realize the text is telling us that vast societies of human beings already existed.
So Adam, therefore, was not the first biological human being to ever walk the earth.
No, he was not biological ground zero.
He was spiritual ground zero.
Exactly. He was the first spiritually awakened figure in this specific narrative arc.
He was the first person taken out of the general population, the wild field, and placed in the garden.
Which we now know means a specific, cultivated community or organization.
And he was given the divine word, or seed, to cultivate. This totally changes how you read the ancient texts.
It changes everything.
A forest isn't just a bunch of timber. A forest is a bustling society.
Right.
That implies that when the prophets talk about burning down a forest or chopping down the tall trees, they aren't talking about ancient deforestation or climate change.
No, they're talking about the destruction of nations.
They're talking about assassinating leaders and wiping out empires.
Which aligns perfectly with the historical record. Conquering empires like Babylon or Assyria are constantly described in the text as lumberjacks cutting down the cedars of Lebanon.
It is a remarkably consistent, brilliantly conceived linguistic system once you possess the key.
It really is.
But it really makes me wonder, does the framework suggest that this metaphorical blindness, the fact that humanity forgot this cipher for thousands of years, was it a deliberate choice?
How do you mean?
Did people in power intentionally obscure the truth to control the masses? Or is it just a tragic byproduct of time, translation, and cultural decay diluting the original language?
Well, the framework implies it's fundamentally a loss of spiritual insight. If you don't possess the spirit or the underlying philosophy of the text, you are left holding only the literal flesh of the text.
The physical words on the page.
Right. And when you only have the physical words, you end up defending absurdities like clapping mountains, magical apples, and talking snakes.
You mistake the envelope for the letter inside it.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, if standard trees are ordinary people, then a highly specific divine tree must represent a highly specific divine person.
Yes.
This leads us to question the anatomy of the ultimate tree of life. If an ordinary person is a standard tree, what happens when someone claims to hold ultimate divine truth?
What does a tree of life actually look like biologically in this cipher?
Exactly.
To map this out, the framework turns to the New Testament, specifically John 15.5, where Jesus makes the famous declaration, "I am the vine, you are the branches."
So the framework equates Jesus directly to the ultimate tree of life that was lost back in Genesis.
Yes, and it provides a shockingly detailed anatomical breakdown of this metaphorical tree.
Let's walk through it from the ground up.
First, you have the trunk, or the main vine. This represents the central prophet or figure in this case, Jesus, who is the primary conduit of the word or divine truth.
They are the root system anchored in the truth, drawing up the lifeblood of the philosophy.
Right. Then you have the branches. In this specific historical context, the framework identifies the branches as the 12 disciples.
They are the immediate offshoots.
They are physically connected to the trunk, and their job is to carry the sap, the teachings outward to a wider radius.
Okay, next are the leaves. The framework connects this to Proverbs 11.28, which says, "The righteous flourish like a green leaf."
And Revelation 22.2, which describes the leaves of the tree of life being used for the healing of the nations.
So the leaves represent the broader followers, the righteous individuals who provide shade, protection, and healing to the wider community.
Exactly. And finally, the ultimate goal of the entire organism, the fruit.
The framework defines the fruit as a combination of three things, right?
Yes. First, the actual uncorrupted word of God being spoken. Second, the righteous behavior produced by the believers, referencing Galatians 5.22 on the fruit of the Spirit, like love, joy, and peace.
And third,
The believers themselves who are born of this truth. It cites James 1.18, which refers to believers as first fruits.
and here is where we revisit the concept of eating. In Revelation 2.7, there is a promise made to give the victorious the right to eat from the tree of life.
Now that we know the tree is a person, the prophet and the fruit is their words of truth, eating simply means intensely listening to, understanding, and internalizing the ultimate truth brought by that figure.
Okay, let's debate an analogy here. Earlier I brought up computer programming. Now I'm thinking about an electrical grid.
Let's hear it.
The anatomy breakdown works perfectly. The trunk is the main power plant, generating the core current of truth. The branches are the high-voltage transmission lines distributing it outward.
Okay, I thought.
The leaves are the outlets in individual homes. And the fruit is the light bulb turning on in someone's mind. You can't have the fruit, the light, without being connected all the way back to the root. If a branch is cut off from the trunk, no fruit, no light.
The grid analogy is excellent for visualizing the distribution of energy and dependency, but I will push back slightly.
Why?
Because a grid is fundamentally an artificial constructed thing. It requires external maintenance.
True.
A tree, however, is a self-sustaining, organic, replicating ecosystem. A power plant doesn't drop seeds to build a new miniature power plant.
Wow. Good point.
But a person who has internalized the truth, who has become a tree of life, drops seeds of that truth into the minds of others, initiating a fractal, organic growth of new trees.
That's a beautiful distinction. It's a living network, not a mechanical one. And what fascinates me is that our sources point out this isn't just an isolated cultural phenomenon locked in the Middle East.
No, it provides an incredible cultural crossover with Eastern philosophy.
Yes, the framework briefly mentions the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama.
It notes the universally recognized tradition that he achieved his ultimate enlightenment, his realization of ultimate truth while sitting under a tree, the Bodhi tree.
And furthermore, the tradition states that after his enlightenment, he was given milk to drink to restore his strength.
Right, and the framework aligns this milk with a passage in 1 Peter 2.2, which urges believers to crave pure spiritual milk.
It reveals a profound, universal human archetype, seeking spiritual wisdom under the canopy of a tree, which might literally mean a tree in the historical narrative of the Buddha, but symbolically, universally, it means resting under the structural framework of divine order and truth.
And consuming spiritual milk is the foundational, nourishing teaching needed for a new believer.
It suggests that this language, seeds, trees, fruit, and the consumption of spiritual food, is deeply embedded in the collective human psyche.
It transcends any single text or religion. It's how human beings naturally conceptualize the growth of consciousness.
Exactly. We understand our own psychological growth through the mirror of the natural world. But there is one final critical element in this botanical metaphor that we haven't touched on yet.
The birds.
Right. We have the soil, which is the mind, the seed, the idea, the tree, the person, the branches, the community, the leaves, the healers, and the fruit, the actions.
But a tree doesn't exist in a vacuum. What about the external forces acting upon the trees?
This brings us full circle, back to where we started with the parable of the mustard seed in Matthew 13.
The story doesn't end with the seed becoming a massive tree. The final crucial detail is that the tree grows large enough for the birds of the air to come and nest in its branches.
If the tree isn't a literal tree, the birds aren't literal birds. In this cipher, the birds are defined as spirits.
Precisely. And it backs this up with arguably the most famous bird metaphor in the entire text.
Matthew 3.16.
Yes, where Jesus is baptized in the Jordan River and the Spirit of God descends upon him like a dove.
So a dove represents a holy, divine, or pure spirit, a spirit of profound insight and peace.
But the framework doesn't just focus on the positive side of the ledger.
It brings in crows and ravens as metaphors for evil, corrupted, or intrusive spirits.
It even includes this great punchy proverb, "Don't laugh at the crow for being black."
Which, within this framework, is a profound psychological warning. It means a person shouldn't self-righteously judge another person for harboring dark thoughts, destructive addictions, or unclean spirits, the crows.
Because their own mental tree might be hosting similarly dark birds just out of sight.
Think about this for a second. If you're listening, maybe you're driving right now or walking your dog. I want you to picture your own mind as this massive, complex tree.
You've been growing it your whole life based on the seeds, the media, the conversations, the philosophies you've allowed to take root in your soil.
What kind of branches have you built? And more importantly, what kind of ideas or spirits are finding a comfortable place to nest in those branches?
Are you cultivating a mental architecture that attracts doves, peace, wisdom, truth?
Or are you cultivating a chaotic, decaying tree that attracts a murder of crows, anxiety, malice, deception?
It's an incredibly confronting thought experiment. It's a profound psychological self-audit masquerading as an agricultural metaphor.
The dynamic is this. A person the tree grows by internalizing truth, the seed.
As they grow in understanding, their cognitive capacity, their branches expands. This newly grown structure inevitably attracts a prevailing mindset, or spirit the bird.
If it is a true tree of life, grown from a divine seed, it attracts a dove, the Holy Spirit, or ultimate divine wisdom.
And this leads to the framework's definition of the kingdom of heaven.
This is vital. The kingdom of heaven is not depicted here as a geographical location with pearly gates floating in the clouds that you travel to after your heart stops beating.
The kingdom of heaven is exactly this internal biological spiritual combination. A living person who has fully grown the seed of truth and subsequently received the nesting bird of divine wisdom.
Jesus is the ultimate tree of life in this text, with the ultimate dove resting on him. Therefore, the framework argues Jesus is the kingdom of heaven personified.
The kingdom is a state of being.
It is the alignment of the human mind with divine truth, which brings us to the grand synthesis of this entire deep dive.
Why does all of this deciphering matter?
Right. What is the ultimate payoff of this incredibly intricate cross-referenced puzzle?
The framework concludes with a sweeping philosophical statement about human nature, human value, and our original state.
It starts by examining the concept of value. It quotes Proverbs 3.14, which says that the profit of wisdom is better than silver and yields better returns than gold.
The text takes a surprisingly cynical, pragmatic look at earthly wealth.
It really does. It looks at the rat race and asks, does money buy a long, peaceful life? Not necessarily.
It points out the brutal realities of the ancient and modern world. Rich men's sons are often the targets of kidnapping. Wealthy people often just work themselves into an early grave through immense stress and paranoia.
The pursuit of literal physical wealth as the ultimate goal is a dead end. Therefore, the framework argues, true wealth, the only wealth that has permanent, unassailable value, is divine wisdom.
And this wisdom is intrinsically, biologically linked to identity. The framework points to Matthew 11.19, which mentions the children of wisdom.
It then makes a massive theological leap by referencing the genealogy in Luke 3.38, which traces the lineage of humanity all the way back to Adam, the son of God.
Here is where the framework delivers the absolute climax of its argument. This is the ultimate aha moment.
The framework states that originally humans were created completely infused with this divine wisdom. It was their natural operating system.
And because they possessed this ultimate divine trait, the seed of truth and the dove of wisdom, they were in essence considered gods or divine beings themselves.
This changes everything about how we view the fall. The fall of man in the Garden of Eden had absolutely nothing to do with a dietary infraction involving a magical piece of fruit.
God wasn't angry because someone ate an apple.
The fall was an epistemological disaster.
Exactly. It was the introduction of a corrupted seed, a lie that altered the cognitive architecture of the human tree. It was the loss of this inherent divine wisdom.
And here is the mechanical breakdown of how that downgrades a person. Because humanity internalized this bad information, their fruit became corrupt.
Their actions became selfish, violent, and disconnected from truth.
Because they lost this specific divine wisdom, they literally lost their divine status. They were functionally downgraded in the hierarchy of reality.
They went from being sons of God to merely being called men.
The ultimate thesis of the text is incredibly empowering, despite the tragedy of the fall. It posits that the kingdom of heaven is the restoration of that lost wisdom within a living human being right now.
When Jesus, the ultimate tree of life, arrived, the kingdom arrived. Because the mechanism to turn mere men back into gods, meaning people filled with divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, was finally restored to the earth.
The pure seed was available again.
It completely reframes the entire biblical narrative. It shifts it from a primitive, punitive story about an arbitrary deity policing a magical orchard to a highly sophisticated psychological and spiritual blueprint for human evolution.
It is a survival manual for reclaiming our highest potential. I just marvel at the scale of this paradigm shift.
It's massive.
If you read the text literally, you are a cursed, miserable descendant of a guy who couldn't follow a simple rule about an apple, and you are just hoping to be forgiven enough to go to a shiny city in the sky when you die.
It's passive. It's depressing.
But if you read it through the cipher, you are a dormant divine being. You are fertile soil waiting for the right seed to be planted so you can grow back into your original state of wisdom and power.
It changes the reader from a passive subject of ancient history to an active, vital participant in their own ongoing spiritual ecosystem.
Okay, let's briefly recap this incredible journey we've been on because we've covered massive ground.
We really have.
We started by looking at the biological absurdity of a mustard seed growing into a giant timber tree, which proved to us we were dealing with a cipher, not literal farming manual.
We learned the code. Seeds are ideas, or the word. Trees are the people who grow structurally from those ideas. The fruit is the actions, behaviors, and words those people eventually produce.
We realized that the Garden of Eden wasn't a literal botanical garden with magic fruit, but an ancient, highly cultivated society. Eating isn't physical consumption, it is the deep psychological act of listening to and completely internalizing information into your identity.
We mapped the anatomy of the ultimate tree. The trunk is the central prophet, the branches are the communities and disciples distributing the truth, and the leaves provide healing.
We looked at the forces acting on the tree. The birds nesting in the branches are spirits or paradigms of thought doves, of wisdom, or crows of darkness.
And we arrived at the grand synthesis. The ultimate fruit of the tree of life is the wisdom required to remember who we originally were, divine beings who lost our way through an epistemological disaster, but who possess the capacity to be restored.
It is a meticulously constructed, highly consistent literary framework that fundamentally alters how you must interact with these ancient words.
It really is.
If this ancient text is truly a mirror reflecting the human condition, rather than a dusty history book chronicling ancient Middle Eastern agriculture, then the Garden of Eden isn't closed off by angels with flaming swords somewhere near a rock.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The geography isn't physical. The geography is entirely internal.
It's inside your own head. You are the soil. You hold the seeds. The question I want to leave you with, the thought experiment I want you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, is this.
What kind of trees are you planting?
When you look closely at the forest of your own life, when you examine your daily habits, your deeply held belief systems, and the words you speak to your family and friends, what kind of fruit are you forcing the people around you to eat?
Are you feeding them life, or are you feeding them poison?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We wish you immense clarity and wisdom as you cultivate your own garden.